So, what is a bicycle? If you can go back to when you were a child and first learned how to ride a bike, I'm sure you could remember the fear and trepidation you experienced when you thought about getting on that bike and risking your personal safety. What was it for? What was the bicycle about? For me, and for a lot of you I'm sure, it was about freedom and independence. Now, I'm no small child, but to me, bicycles are still, to this day, about my own personal freedom and independence. And they represent that so many different ways. I'd love to share with you how they can keep doing that for us and the ways that we're eroding that, taking the value away from bicycles. This is an exact replica, only one size larger, of the bike that I initially learned how to ride with training wheels. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old. It was a Schwinn Stingray. The color was red. It was a hand-me-down from my brother. I couldn't wait to learn how to ride it. But I'd almost never been so scared in my life. I did build this bike as an homage to my first bicycle, and there really was no other reason for it. But after I put it together and started putting miles on it, I started to realize there's something beautiful about this bicycle that some of my higher end, more modern, technologically advanced bicycles just didn't have to offer. It made me curious. Is there no one out there who wants these things that this older bike has to offer? It seems silly to me because what it has adheres to the original core values of freedom and independence. If we examine this bike, we're going to see that it has a coaster brake setup. There's no cables on this bike whatsoever, and it's only got one speed. As you can see, the wheel and axle are attached to the frame with nuts. They're common size. Almost any garage or home would have the tools necessary to take this wheel off and replace the tire or the chain. Visiting the front wheel, you see the same type of setup. Very simple. Moving up the fork to the headset, also very simplistic tools. Large pair of pliers, adjustable wrench, and just your hand is enough to get the headset completely taken apart. It's made out of bigger ball bearings that pretty much can be just cleaned and lubricated. As long as the water doesn't get into these bearings, this headset will never need to be replaced. The one-piece crankset virtually never needs to be serviced. It's very simple to install and even simpler to operate. This bike literally has one thing, and that's pedal to go forward and pedal backwards to stop. It couldn't be any simpler than that, making this bike easy for anybody to use. Bikes like these will virtually last forever. In fact, this one's upwards of 50 years old, and it rides like a dream. All the parts are from the era that it was built in, and I've done really nothing to upgrade it or service it. Let's compare that to this, the most technologically advanced bicycle I own. It was the most expensive, the highest performance, and it requires the most maintenance. Maintenance that I can't do myself. I mean, right here, this shock, it only has so many miles to go before it needs to be serviced. And when it does, I won't be able to do it. The number of specialty tools and specific knowledge to service that shock is just something that I can't really have at my fingertips. It's not accessible to me, a working person who has to concentrate on my career, my house, and my family. So it's going to be best to replace it or pay someone else to repair it. And from what I understand, I'm going to have to mail it in. Same goes for the front fork. There's just nothing in there that I can really service without having some sort of higher education and specialty tool set. Dropper post, clutched derailleur, rear hub and cassette, hydraulic brakes. In fact, virtually everything on this bike is a specialty item. right down to these pivot points, the bottom bracket, even the sprocket. They're all special items requiring special knowledge, special tools, special maintenance. I mean, there's settings on this bike. I don't even know what they do or how to operate them or what would make them good for me. I have to consult an expert just to understand how to adjust this bike for my needs. Now, as you well have may have noticed, I do own that mountain bike. And there are some good reasons for me sacrificing some of the independence and freedom I would have with our first example in order to gain the technological advances allowed by the second example. When I was in high school, I read a philosophy book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. In this book, it's detailed how technology is viewed in different ways by different people, allowing different results. On the one hand, you have people who look into technology and try to understand how it works so that they can then maintain it. And on the other hand, you have people that are users of technology who really don't want to get into the understanding of how it works and don't want to maintain it. It struck me the way that this book encased the debate of technology. To me, on one hand, to be able to maintain and understand your own machines allowed independence and freedom in a way that accepting a machine as a blank, faceless object that you don't have access to makes it so that you have to depend on other people and institutions to maintain the bike and exercise your freedom. In other words, you need help to use that. Now, if we look at the bearings inside of the bikes that we looked at earlier, the 70s Schwinn bike has these large ball bearings in this very rudimentary cage that you can see and interact with. You know how to grease this. You just put grease in it. You can tell when it's gone bad because the balls will be missing or the shell will be rusted away. But really, for the most part, it's over-designed in such a way that it basically won't fail. As long as you keep it lubricated, this headset bearing will last literally hundreds of years and tens of thousands of miles. On the other hand, we have the mountain bike headset. And much like the philosophy book, this is a faceless piece of technology. You don't see any ball bearings. There is no way to service this. There is no way of knowing whether what's going on in there is okay or not okay. To use this sort of bearing relies on you, the end user, to take it to your local expert to then tell you whether or not it needs to be replaced, and then to replace it for you with an entirely new bearing. There's no way to open this up, see what's going on inside, and keep it running for a long time. A bearing like this will not last 100 years. Independence and freedom. Service required by a professional. Go for a bike ride today. Take a trip to the bike shop. Hopefully by now you can see where I'm going with this. And I can hear the adversaries in the background saying, yeah, throw away all the good things about bicycles because you're too afraid to go to the bike shop. Or those bearings last so long you'll never have a problem. I understand that sentiment, and this is the reason I own that mountain bike. For some things, the sacrifice is worth it. The juice is worth the squeeze. That mountain bike and its high-end suspension that I can't service will perform on trails in a way that no approachable suspension system, like, say, the mountain bikes of the 90s that just had a crude spring, yeah, I could service those. They don't perform in the way that this modern air spring suspension performs. I can't deny that. When I take that mountain bike out on the trail, it handles the trail in a way that is profoundly improved from its predecessors. So does this mean that I should always just go to the bike shop and ask for the most expensive, most technologically advanced carbon fiber bicycle that they sell? I don't think so. It's important for me to keep my core values in mind, and it's important to recognize that technology is a hell of a drug. The things that bring technology to the table aren't always what makes a product good or what makes a product better. And it's important to be discerning about that. That mountain bike we were talking about delivers on promises. It performs better. It does things that other bicycles won't do. But when I ride a bicycle every day, for the most part, I just need to turn the pedals and end up going in a direction so that I can experience autonomy, independence, and freedom. My 70s bicycle does that. I have other 70s bicycles that do that. So unless I'm going to enter into some sort of race, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to spend a lot of money on a high-end bicycle built for performance out of parts that I can't service, out of technology that I don't need. Before anesthesia, surgery was very traumatic for people. Even if you survived the surgery and your health problem was solved, the trauma of having to go through that procedure while awake, experiencing all the pain and fear, people would never be the same again. There was a long debate as to whether it was even worth it to get a medical procedure done. So when anesthesia was invented, that technology was groundbreaking. It changed life for humans all over the world almost instantly, making health something that we could all work towards through medical science. That's an example of good technology, good use of technology. Technology is a hell of a drug, though. Just because it changed our lives forever in the form of anesthesia doesn't mean it's going to improve every experience that we have. And anytime you implement new technology, there's a great expense. The expense of manufacturing, the expense of maintaining, the expense of re-educating all of the users that use the technology. And it just isn't always worth it. That's something that we lose sight of. Technology cannot solve all of our problems. It can solve a lot of problems. But some problems are problems that don't really exist. Some technology is a solution looking for a problem. Let's just call this phenomenon solutionism. It's the idea that it's necessary to have engineers and developers working on new products that consumers will buy. It drives the industry, it helps promote sales, and makes the impossible possible by having an endless offering of things that people have to buy. In some ways it's necessary. But you, the consumer, can have your core values, and you shape the industries. You drive what innovations arrive at our doorstep. Now, I'm not saying everybody should stick to riding these old 70s and 80s Schwinn bicycles because of their simplicity and their independence. But I will say, I think it's important for us all to be cognizant of what's happening in the world today and how we can shape the outcome. This crude bottom bracket, which would have had external bearings and been serviceable by a child, had to get replaced. What'd they replace it with? The cartridge style bottom bracket. Okay, it does the same thing, but this one requires specialty tools. The bearings are no longer accessible and not serviceable. All right, well, how can we say that's better? Is that just solutionism? Well, I won't go that far. This does make replacing the bottom bracket convenient, and I could see some arguments for something like this. But what is solutionism is this guy. It's just a different shape. It's the same device. Even worse, yet another one. Just a different shape. How many of these are there? Many, many, many. These are all solutions to problems that don't exist. I don't know. Maybe we should have just stuck around with these big, heavy, ugly, serviceable, last forever components. right? Well, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not here to say that this is the future. But if technology was really clever, they'd find a way to bring the performance enhancements that something like this can have, and they could combine it with the ease and serviceability that something like this can have. And it isn't until there's an educated consumer who wants to buy a product like that that one will be developed. Now, personally, I believe that the pendulum will swing. Bikes keep getting more and more complicated. They're all carbon fiber. They require special maintenance, special tools, special everything. And they're practically disposable. Once they get so many miles on them, they just need to be replaced. Mostly because of all the standards that are changing and the fact that you can't buy parts and that you can't maintain it yourself. And it gets to the point where if you're going to take it to a shop and have them convert it to parts that are current so that it can be maintained, you may as well have bought a brand new bicycle because it would be less expensive. But I do believe the pendulum swings. At some point, the people who pick up bicycles for those core values of freedom and independence are going to realize that they're not getting that from their bicycle in any way other than riding it. And I wouldn't be surprised if pretty soon they'll develop bicycles that you need a subscription to ride. Think about electronic shifting. Think about AI. How long before they connect your shifter to a satellite connection that then has AI decide when and how your bike should shift? And for that, they're going to charge you a monthly fee. Wake up. Electronic shifting is not going to make your bike profoundly better. You are probably not going to be out there winning races. You're probably riding a bike because you need to get fit, you need some fresh air, you need some therapy, you need some freedom and autonomy. And it's at your fingertips with a bicycle. You can just get on it and ride. Life is a river, and it's going to take you where it's going to take you. And you can paddle and sort of orient yourself on the river, but ultimately we're all going down the river together. I understand that the bike industry is changing. I understand we're probably not going to see high quality, easily serviceable steel bikes come back into popularity. But what I can do is at least point out that these things aren't necessarily better, these new advancements. If you've watched any of my videos lately, you'll see that I've been deleting carbon fiber parts from my gravel bike here because I don't really enjoy the benefits that carbon fiber brings to my ride. And I also don't enjoy the worry and the serviceability or lack thereof that they bring. So for me, I'm going to stick with older bikes that I can service and customize myself because that's what cycling is to me. It's harkened back to that original moment when I got on a bicycle as a child. And I was full of fear and trepidation and almost didn't want to do it. But I knew on the other side of learning to ride that bike was true freedom and independence. And it was worth the sacrifice to me to get that independence. And I'd like to point out to you that that freedom and independence is there when I ride that 70s bike. It's there when I ride my mountain bike. It's there when I ride my old Schwinn Latour. Bicycles will deliver that experience with or without carbon fiber, with or without sealed bearings, with or without electronic shifting. So let's make a space in the universe for simpler bikes that give us what we wanted when we grabbed those handlebars as a child. Tell me why this isn't the pinnacle of freedom and independence. You should comment below as to why you think that these old bicycles are insufficient and why they needed to be changed and why we've abandoned those core values that made bicycles so special.